I have an acid test for partnerships that you listeners should really pay attention to, which is if you have a partnership that is real and going to have impact, then that partnership should have caused you to open up Excel and redo your forecast. This partnership should have made you change the top line revenue, or it should have made you change the cost of goods sold. But if this partnership, you announce it and you never had to boot Excel to figure out what the impact is, then I would say your partnership is probably bullshit.
Hi, it's Phil, and in this episode of Partnership Plus, we have the opportunity to talk to Guy Kawasaki, the former Chief Evangelist at Apple, now Chief Evangelist at software powerhouse Canva. He has had an extraordinary career, and we dive into each of the steps around his career. We talk about his podcast, Remarkable People, his new book, Think Remarkable, and he talks to us a lot about what it takes to make a great partnership, what to look for, why so many of them are just not worth the paper they're written on. We dive into cochlear implants. We talk about his love of Australia and so much more. So without further ado, here is Guy Kawasaki. All right, Guy Kawasaki, what a pleasure to catch up with you. And we were just talking, it turns out that we're colleagues at the same university, the University of New South Wales, in some strange universe. I
thought they looked familiar.
That's right. We've been there together. It's amazing. But thanks for joining me today. We are going to make this episode all about growth, grit, and grace. And there's a good reason for that, because you've just released a book with a bunch of collaborators, which is extraordinary, and it maps towards those three qualities. But, before we get started,
yes, it does.
I need to tell you, I have 4 favorite episodes from Remarkable People, your podcast, which kept me going through COVID, which has pushed me out the other side of COVID. And one most recently really changed the way I thought about negotiation. So let me just quickly tell you those 4, because if people are watching this and listening to this, they've got to get into these as well. Esther Wojcicki, who is the mother of Anne, of Susan and Janet. She had that trick framework that was all about trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. That just hit me so hard when I heard it. It was amazing. Particularly, I'm in biotech, and so when I look at the things that Anne has done at 23andMe, quite extraordinary. Stan McChrystal, as a veteran, he really speaks to how I think about leadership, and he's such a guiding light in all of these things. He said recently, well, it wasn't recently, it was some time ago, that trust decreases transaction costs. And when you sort of think about that in a big military context, super impressive. Ginny Rometty, first female CEO at IBM, when you talk to her about what she thought was important and what she had to do as one of 4 children to make sure that she could sort of get to where she was for education, something else. And then the one that really changed me recently, William Ury, and getting to yes. Like that for me was something else. So thank you for going to all the effort of making these kind of episodes work, because it's something else, and it's really, really impressive.
Well, thank you. I'm very flattered that you like my podcast that much. I mean, my podcast, I think, is the finest work that I have done in my career. Right? It's also the least appreciated. So any appreciation is very, very good.
Well, you've got at least one follower here, and I tell you what, it's I know what it takes to pull these sort of episodes together, and just having those kind of conversations and the way that happens is awesome. So, listen, we're going to talk about the book, the podcast. We're going to talk about partnerships, and before we do, anyone who listens to what you've done or follows your career, which has been something else, they know the backstory, but many don't. So let's start there. What was growing up for you like to get you from, zero Guy Kawasaki to 21 years old? Like, what was that journey like? What was your growing up like?
Well, that journey was, first of all, completely unplanned and unstructured. I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, lower middle income family. And then in the 6th grade, I'm going to go further back than 21. In the 6th grade, an elementary school teacher convinced my parents to take me out of the public school system of Hawaii, put me in the private school system so I could go to college. And luckily, my parents listened to her and made the sacrifices to make that possible. So now I'm in this really great college prep school, which enables me to get into Stanford, where I just, I had the blinders removed from me. I had the scales taken off my eyes because I saw, wow, this is a really big world. Right. It's much bigger than Hawaii. And I became friends with someone who a few years later gave me a job at Apple as a second software evangelist. And, from there, it's like software evangelist for Apple, and then startup entrepreneur, and then back to Apple, and then startup entrepreneur. Now I am the chief evangelist of Canva, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Yep. I am a podcaster, Remarkable People. I'm an author, Think Remarkable. And I love to surf.
That's awesome. I mean, have you come down here and surfed? Because I figure that we have reasonable surf, but you and Hawaii has got a remarkable surf.
Well, I'm actually in Santa Cruz, and I've been to Australia many times. And one time I was there and I was hanging out with Lane Beachley, and Lane Beachley is like, I'm telling her, well, my shortest board is 10 feet. And she's looking at me like I'm nuts because she's 8-time world champion surfer, and her board's about 5 feet.
That's it.
I couldn't even sit in the water on a 5-foot board. So it was, luckily, we were going to go out surfing that day. Luckily, there were no waves because I anticipated 2 hours of total humiliation.
That's amazing. I mean, Lane Beachley, she is one of our national treasures. There's no doubt.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
Professional influencers, Marty Gruber, your boss at Nova, who you say in the book was a profound influence on you. What did he teach you at that really early piece? Because you've come to California.
Everybody thinks that the path to high technology is you go to an Ivy League school, you major in computer science, and then you get an internship at Google, and then you go to Apple or Google or Amazon or Facebook. Well, what happened with me is that I graduated from college. I went to law school. I went to law school for a grand total of 2 weeks, and I quit. I went back to Hawaii for the rest of that academic year. And the following year, I entered UCLA. And at UCLA, I was getting an MBA. And when I was there, it was a 4-day-a-week program. So I had 3 days off. So I took a part-time job because, as I told you, I didn't come from a rich family. And the part-time job I just happened to get is with a jewelry manufacturing company. And I literally was counting diamonds. And after I graduated, I went to work for that jewelry manufacturer, which, not a lot of MBAs went to a small family-held jewelry manufacturing company. They were going to B of A and Lehman Brothers and Accenture and McKinsey and Goldman Sachs. And Guy went to Nova Stylings. And the boss there was a guy named Marty Gruber. And he gave me enough rope to hang myself. He let me try all kind of things. I was in sales and marketing, and I really learned how to sell at Nova Stylings. And selling in this context, because I think if you're Gen Z and you're listening to this, you think, oh, Guy was in sales. That means he was in e-commerce, and he was figuring out, with this A/B test, is the purple link better than the blue link? What percentage of click-throughs do we get? Yeah. But not at all. It was like pre-internet days, pre-computer days, really. And it was hand-to-hand combat, face-to-face hand-to-hand combat, which taught me how to sell. And that has been a most valuable skill for the rest of my life.
When we think about the next job that went to Eduware, this was the thing that gave you the track into Apple and into technology. It was like a massive transition moment for you. Let's use that as the way to introduce Think Remarkable, because
let me just be transparent here, okay? All right. So I fell in love with the Apple II because the Apple II enabled me to do word processing and spreadsheet and database. And now you have to go back. This is in the mid-70s, 1970, not 1870. Right. And to have a word processor instead of an electric typewriter was a mind-blowing advancement. Okay? It's just like mind-blowing. No more backspacing and lift-off tape and whiteout and, erasable paper that you could use a pencil eraser to erase your you're typing. And so I fell in love with the Apple II, and I fell in love with computing. So I wanted to get into the computer business, but being a psychology major, ex-jewelry company, nobody exactly wanted to let me in. I interviewed, I think, a few dozen companies and nothing. And then just one person's misfortune happened to be my fortune, which is there was a show in Las Vegas, and it was called Comdex. And this was a small software company called Eduware Services, and they sold educational software, hence Edu and Ware. And they were like, I don't know, 5-person company. They did drill in practice kind of math, 2 + 2 = 4. And they had a tiny booth at Comdex. And on the way to Comdex, they drove from LA. I mean, they drove from LA to Las Vegas. They got in a car accident, and the director of marketing got injured. So now they had an opening, which is how I got a job in the software business. Now, you said earlier that, Eduware Services was kind of the bridge that got me into tech and got me into Apple because, it was my entry point into tech. But I mean, that is at one sense true because it was my entry point into tech. But the more honest answer is that I got a job at Apple, not because of Eduware, but because my classmate from Stanford was doing the hiring. So I am purely the result of nepotism, not because of Eduware. He didn't hire me because I was at Eduware. He hired me because we knew each other from Stanford. I saw Macintosh, and I saw Mac Paint and Mac Write. And if you had gone from manual typewriter to electric typewriter to Apple II word processing to Mac Write and Mac Paint, and now Mac Write and Mac Paint is like what you see is what you get on the printer, what you see is what you get on the monitor. Multiple fonts, integration of text and graphics, beautiful document, dot matrix printers. It's hard not to be evangelistic about that. Yeah. So I can't tell you that there was any great trauma at Apple. Well, until the very end when, Apple was starting to fail and Steve got fired and big layoffs and all that. But up to that point, man, it was like getting paid to go to work.
In Think Remarkable, 9 chapters, one of them which really jumped out at me, chapter 2, it talks about embracing vulnerability. And you say, without exception, the journey towards remarkableness is fraught with setbacks, delays, and mistakes. Now, you and I have got friends that we can open doors for. Many people don't have that. And so they're going to be trying to work out how they get in, put themselves out there, get smacked back, get back up again. When you think about a failure recovery system, like a way to sort of process that kind of issue, if you're talking to somebody who has been through 30 setbacks and is still trying to make it work, they're probably showing a fair bit of grit and a fair bit of tenacity to make that work. What do you say to somebody who's been rejected a lot of times, but it's not working for them?
Or they're nuts. I mean, yeah. Listen, first of all, I want to emphasize the growth mindset is necessary. And the growth mindset means that you believe you can learn new skills and do new things. The flip side of the growth mindset is vulnerability, because if you are learning new things, it's very unlikely that you're going to instantly become very good at something. So you're going to have setbacks and failures and delays. So I think you just need to set your mind straight to listen. This is going to be a rocky road. It's not going to be, from infinity to beyond in the next 90 days. So you need to prepare yourself for getting wounded, really. I took up ice hockey at 44. I took up surfing at 60. When you do things like that, when you take up those sports that late, you have to embrace the fact that, you are going to get hurt. Yeah. And some of it is physical hurt, but a lot of it is mental hurt, because if you start surfing at 60, you're going to spend a lot of time falling.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. What has that taught you in yourself, though? Like you said, I'm going to do this. I think it was one of your kids that said, let's get into the hockey that one of your kids brought you into?
Yeah.
That first day, you get out there. What are you thinking to yourself? Because this is a perfect example of that kind of growth mindset.
Well, I think, if you're honest, like in your first like practice with hockey or practice with surfing, for me, it was instant love. And look, I sucked at it, right? I couldn't skate and I couldn't surf, but I had just enough of a taste to see how great these sports could be. Yeah. Just enough, right? Any less than I would have given up. Any more, well, it wasn't going to happen anymore. So I don't need to worry about that. And then I guess I just have that kind of growth and grit mindset that, I said, this is going to be fun. I'm going to love this. And I just, I used to go to these open skating sessions and just practice skating. And I set up a hockey net and a shooting thing in my backyard. And I took up inline skating to help my skating off ice. And, I practiced stick handling. And the secret to my success, I have to tell you, is I am willing to pay the price. I love grinding it out.
Yeah. So it's just the process, right? The process of learning, getting better, moving it forward.
And you know what? It's the same thing for not just sports, but same thing for podcasting, same thing for writing. I just love grinding it out. I can outwork most people.
It's tell me about how you make that transition then from grinding it out to getting to a point where you feel like you know how to do this well. Like, is there a moment where you sort of go, actually, I feel like I'm doing this okay now? And then all of a sudden it changes, I'm sure.
It's not clear to me that I ever achieved that status with hockey or surfing. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. But you asked a few minutes ago, like, what was your first things going through your mind? And I think when I took up hockey and surfing, first things that were going through my mind is I'm making an ass of myself. That there are people in the rink looking at me saying, what a freaking loser. He can't even skate. And then when I'm surfing, every time I fall, I'm thinking, oh, people up there on the cliff who are watching, they're all laughing at me. I'm making an ass of myself. But then I figured out that, most people are not watching you guys. Don't flatter yourself. They could care less. And then even if they are watching you and they see you fall, they don't give a shit if you fall. I mean, it's not like,
100%. Oh my God, that is so true. That is so true.
So at the end of the day, I was worried about nothing. I fall with great abandon. No, I don't care. Nobody's going to see. And if they did see, so what?
That's it. That is it. Tell me, when you have, like, I spoke to Ryan Hawke recently, who tells me a lot about failure recovery systems. And he was a football player, and a lot of people who play hockey and other contact sports, when things don't go well, like you said, it can hurt. Like physically it can hurt. And you can get stuck in a rut on pitch. And he talks about this idea of having a physical reminder that you can get back in the game. It can be things like just tapping yourself on the shoulder and saying, look, just reset. Let's get back in the game. Do you have something like that?
Nope. I don't. Like, I gave up hockey for surfing, right? And so I surf today. And if I miss a wave or if I pearl means that you paddle too far in front of the wave, and then the wave it crashes you. It pushes your head down into the water and you go flipping over. That's what's called pearling. I think it's because it's like diving for pearls. You're right. Supposed to be on top of the water, not head down in the water. Anyway. And at some point, I mean, maybe it's because I'm 70. I just don't give a shit, right? And it's like, all right, so I paddle, well, get the next one. I think it's a mental attitude. And again, I figured out nobody saw me pearl, and if they did, so what?
That's it. Tell me, when I've seen you talk, when we move into sort of the evangelism, you mentioned before going to work to Apple was like being paid to work, but just for pure joy, right? And I've felt that before, and I know exactly what you mean. I had that same feeling when I was in the Army. Being paid to do that job just felt to me like a strange thing that happened. And I loved
in the Army. Yeah. What were you doing that was so fun?
Look, I just finished school. I enlisted right out of high school, and I hadn't made any money, but I had been an Army cadet in my high school. I had tasted what it was like to be out in the field, learning new skills, working as a team, having fun. And then by the time you get paid to do that as a soldier, you get to be in big machines doing big things with other people that really enjoyed it too. That was that, and you got paid. Are you kidding me? This was fantastic. So when you talk about this idea of selling a dream, right? And we're going to fast forward a little bit now into the book where it's in chapter 6, and you say selling a dream. It's all about convincing others of your vision via evangelism, coalition building, persuasion, and what it takes. That determines the magnitude of your achievements. What was your first month or so like at Apple when you were told you need to build complete evangelism, not inside this business, but outside? Like what did you do? What was your first steps to try and make that happen?
Well, I mean, honestly, my first month, coming from like 6 months in the software business and a psychology degree and counting diamonds, my first month, it was just shutting up and watching my boss in action because I didn't know anything about writing software, right? Yeah. So here you have a guy who's an ex-jeweler, psych major, who has been in the software business for 6 months, and now he's got to go and convince the most technical people that they should write software for a computer that doesn't exist. I mean, talk about fake it until you make it. Oh my gosh.
But with that, I mean, there is something you must have been learning at a pretty high rate and then communicating that back to others to try and convince them to do that. I mean, I know it doesn't happen overnight, but it seems like you've got quite a knack for that.
Knock on wood, I hope you're right. But yeah, and well, listen, Mike Boych is the guy that gave me the job and was my boss. He's an extremely smart guy. And you know what? I also think at some level, evangelism and marketing and sales, this is kind of a skill set. And it could be for Macintosh, it could be for diamonds, it could be for, social media network, it could be selling trash cans. I mean, at some level, these skills are the same. It's not, I don't know if I could sell, medical stents or something, but yeah. I bet you I could actually. But I mean, sales is sales, if you ask me.
Yeah. I mean, I remember hearing the first time you were talking about Canva and you said it's Photoshop for the rest of us. And it was like, yes, it is. That is exactly what it is. But it was a fantastic simplicity that allowed people to really connect. And this was easily 6 or 7 years ago, right? When Canva was still finding its feet, and now it's something extraordinary. Tell me about your approach to coalition building. This is something that fascinates me because whether it's in a new venture where you're trying to get the first adopters or whether it's trying to get a political movement done, you talk in the book about how people have stood up, a voice to power, and they've had to build, whether online or offline, their coalition to make their voice heard so they're not considered a crazy person. How do you go about building a coalition? Like, what is your advice around coalition building?
Well, I think the starting point of building a coalition is to build a coalition around something great, because it is very easy to build a coalition around something great if it's great. I mean, that's the hard part. I mean, I think marketing is easy of something great. Evangelizing something great is easy. The hard part is making the thing great. And if you are given something great, then, you really got to blow it to not succeed in evangelizing and sales. So now, of course, people may be listening to this and saying, well, Guy, thank you very much. Until I heard this podcast, I was going to go evangelize shit, but now I know I have to go evangelize great stuff. Oh, that was such a brilliant insight, Guy. Well, I mean, I understand the sarcasm and I understand how you could take that attitude, but I guess I'm telling you that if you want to succeed in sales and marketing and entrepreneurship, find or create something great. Don't do it with shit. It's so much harder with shit.
So I spent a lot of my time advising companies how to build really fantastic, ideal partnerships, right? And this is because in all the companies I've built, all 6 companies, I never had a big marketing budget to make it work. So we had to distribute through other brands. We had to do deals with supply chains. And often it was this small Australian company saying, hey, listen, can you help? And they're saying, well, maybe, what did you have in mind? And you build out the coalition. So if we sort of do an overlap there between coalitions and partnerships, do you have in your history a couple of partnerships that really moved the needle, whether it be at Apple or beyond, which was two companies that just made it work?
Well, I think the mother of all partnerships in the history of Apple has to be Apple and Aldus, because Aldus was a company. Well, it was Aldus and Adobe. It was AAA, come to think of it. Apple, Adobe, and Aldus. And this is the framework that created desktop publishing.
Right.
So Aldus created PageMaker, which was the killer app of Apple's Macintosh. And Adobe created the printing that allowed you to have beautiful graphics and beautiful printing. And so if you had PageMaker that could make beautiful documents, and you didn't have Adobe's PostScript that could print beautiful documents, you wouldn't have a complete solution. And if Adobe could print beautiful documents, but nobody could make them because they only had Mac Paint and Mac Write, then you wouldn't have desktop publishing either. So desktop publishing, Aldus, Adobe, and Apple, Aldus and Adobe saved Apple from destruction. If it wasn't for Aldus and Adobe, I don't think there would be an Apple today. It's very hard to find examples of partnerships that are as good as the one with Adobe, Apple, and Aldus. Because quite frankly, most partnerships are bullshit. And they're bullshit in the sense that, you want to make this announcement, and the most important part of the announcement is the PR, right? It's like, we want our two CEOs to stand up and say we have a partnership. Mm-hmm. And then people at both companies are saying, what the hell are they talking about? I mean, we don't need them and they don't need us. And like, what's the partnership? It's just like a press release ploy.
Yeah.
And I think that describes about 99% of partnerships. So I have an acid test for partnerships that you listeners should really pay attention to, which is, if you have a partnership that is real and going to have impact, then that partnership should have caused you to open up Excel and redo your forecasts. This partnership should have made you change the top line revenue, or it should have made you change the cost of goods sold. But if this partnership, you announce it and you never had to boot Excel to figure out what the impact is, then I would say your partnership is probably bullshit.
Man, you have nailed it. You have nailed it. That is fantastic. You know what? Yes, that is awesome, guy.
Maybe we should end it now. Drop the mic.
That's extraordinary. Well, I'm not going to let you get away that quickly, because that was fantastic. I think, let me tell you that there is something deeper that came out of this book, right? And it was this thing in chapter 8, which talked about taking the high road. And this is where there's this transition from success to grace. And you talk about, and the thing that I just really want to sort of double click on with you is this idea of valuing all people. How do we every single day, like, what's your principle for valuing all people so we can do it better every day? Tell me about that.
Well, I think this is an attitude that comes with age. And although I got to tell you, the framework for this was set by my parents when I was very young. And they kind of said, just like, have this sense of karma and have this sense that you need to pay back society and you need to help others because you've been helped. Yeah. And, there's this karmic scoreboard in the sky. And my father told me, give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't look for trouble. Trouble's going to find you enough. You don't need to go look for it. And so that was the framework. And I just, like I said, maybe it just comes with age. But at some point you realize, if you're successful, or the more successful, the more you probably realize this, is that, you could have a growth mindset. You could be gritty. You could be, perseverance and all that good stuff. But it's not just you that made you a success. It's that elementary school teacher that convinced my parents to put me in a different school. It's Marty Gruber who taught me about how to sell, right? And it's Steve Jobs who was this inspiration to me. It's like a lot of people. It was football coaches. I mean, there were a lot of people in my life who just influenced me or taught me stuff and, pushed me in the right direction. It's not just because I'm such a wonderful person that I would have achieved this without them. That is bullshit. You're delusional if you believe that. So that means you take the high road. And, I've come to believe that everybody you meet can do something much better than you. So, don't think you're the center of the universe. And that waiter that, you think is just supposed to bring you water and, wait on you hand and foot. That waiter may be the greatest longboard surfer in all of Australia. So, don't think you're so great just because you're the diner and he's the waiter. And I think that is a much better and healthier attitude to go through life, that everybody can do something better than you.
I love that. I've got 5 questions in a rapid fire for you that I'd love to get
fire away.
Before we do that, I'd love to know what you think. And we just talked about probably the ultimate partnership advice you just gave before. You don't open Excel. There's nothing to see here. The world is a bit of a fractious place right now. And I think a lot of leaders are talking the idea of partnership. And I don't think they fully understand what that means, right? So tell me, what would you say to leaders that are thinking about trying to form partnerships beyond opening Excel and making sure it's going to make a difference? Like, why should people think about partnership as opposed to going it alone?
Well, I think you should think about partnership as opposed to going it alone. If you can see that both organizations benefit from it. And if you think it's only you that's going to benefit, then I would make the case that this partnership is not going to live long. And if you can see that only the other company or the other organization is going to benefit, you won't like it very long. So yeah, you can have the nice press release, you can have the press conference and all that. But unless both of you benefit from this partnership, it's not going to work out. Yeah. So that's another good test. Like, here's a concept for you, which is like, pretend that you're the other organization CEO and draft his press release or draft her press release, right? Yep. What is he or she going to say about this partnership? So look at it from their eyes.
Yep. Beautiful. I love it. All right, rapid fire. Here we go.
Okay.
Guy Kawasaki. Complete this sentence. Partnership is?
Usually bullshit.
I'll take it because it's important. Question 2. What content are you loving at the moment?
Wow. Listen, I'm in the United States. There's not a lot of content to love right now. I mean, what can I say?
Is there a book? Are you listening to stuff?
I mean, this sounds a little self-referential, but I love the people that I am interviewing on my podcast. So I'm not taking credit for their content. It's their content, right? My job is to get it out of them, but I love what I'm hearing on my podcast. It's such a joy.
Remarkable people, everybody, get into it. And I, as another listener, it is extraordinary. You guys do a great job. What's the worst piece of advice you've ever received and why?
The worst piece of advice? Probably, screw them before they screw you. That's the worst piece of advice. It doesn't work out like that.
It never works out like that. All right, question 4. When you see a potential for a new partnership, what's the first thing you do to turn that potential into action?
The first thing you should do is what I discussed earlier, which is when you're thinking of this partnership, think about, well, what line in my Excel spreadsheet is going to change? Yep. And if you cannot think of a line that's going to change, don't do the partnership.
Love it. All right. Final question. What's the one thing you're deeply grateful for right now?
Oh man, what do you mean one thing? I was like 50,000 things that I'm grateful for.
Great answer.
I'm grateful for my wife. I'm grateful for my 4 children. I'm grateful that at 69 years old, I can still surf every day. You know, I am deaf. I don't know if you realize that I'm deaf. So I am grateful for my cochlear implant, which guess where it's from? Sydney, Australia.
You know what? Cochlear implants are made about 10 kilometers from my home.
Oh, do you know anybody there?
I know Dig Howard, the CEO. I know him well.
You know the CEO?
Yeah.
You tell the CEO of Cochlear that I am a Cochlear customer and it has changed my life. It is a freaking miracle that a cochlear implant work. I cannot believe that. You know, I got it implanted. It's like a 30-day, like, you know, you let it, I don't know, heal up in your head.
Yeah.
And then you go to your audiologist and your audiologist tells you, you know, we're going to hook you up. We're going to turn this on. And if you can hear anything at all, that's a good sign. And I'm telling you, he turned my cochlear implant on. And 10 minutes later, we were having a conversation. And it was a freaking miracle. It was, cochlear implant changed my life. But I wasn't, so seriously, the next time you see him or that, you tell him that it has changed my life. And if there's anything I can do, I can be an evangelist for cochlear without a doubt. I mean, I'd be the best evangelist you ever had. Anyway, but the reason why I brought up my deafness is, in a sense, I'm grateful that the worst thing medically that's happened to me is deafness. Now, people may listen to that and say, what the hell are you talking about, guy? You know, what a pain in the ass to be deaf. And that is true, but I'm telling you that nobody ever died from deafness. Mm-hmm. And if you said, guy, you know, you can either be deaf or you can have pancreatic cancer or you can have ALS. Guess what I would pick, right? So I'm telling you, if God said, guy, the worst that's going to happen to you until you croak is you're going to be deaf if you sign this paper right here, I would reach for the pen. I would start signing immediately.
I am going to let Dig know.
So I'm grateful that I'm deaf.
I am going to let Dig know that it's going to make his day, I'm sure. Guy, I just want to say it has been such a pleasure to talk to you today.
Oh, thank you.
Your podcast.
Thank you very much.
This book, it is something else.
You know, I have a cochlear implant from Australia. I work for an Australian company. I use Australian laptop monitor from Espresso. What else do I have? I have a dead kook surfboard from Australia. I mean,
there's a lot to love.
A lot of things. Yeah.
There's a lot to love.
And someday when I retire, if Donald Trump becomes president, I might move to Australia and I'm going to live at Balmoral Beach because I love Balmoral Beach. I love Balmoral Beach Club.
Balmoral Beach is 5 kilometers from here. You are welcome here anytime. We'll go surfing together. Oh, it's amazing.
You know there that beach club restaurant there?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They have the best muesli and the best pancakes I've had in the world.
You are welcome here anytime. Everybody, if you've enjoyed this episode, which I know you have, you need to go and visit guykawasaki.com. You need to look up wherever you can get Think Remarkable, and you need to get part of this podcast, Remarkable People. Guy, thank you so much, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you very much. Send my best to all my friends in Australia. Thank you.
You bet. Hey, it's Phil, and thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode of Partnership Plus. You know, if you're one of the 61% of people who have viewed this video without subscribing to the channel, please think about subscribing. The bigger the channel, the bigger the guests. So, I'll see you in the next episode, and thanks again for being here.